All right, so welcome to the FHIR community and thanks for being here.
No slides, right?
No, I don't have any slides. FHIR was started with a really small group of us and we had some common beliefs. And the first was that standards create good IT solutions which create health change. You laugh. Imagine what it would be like without them. But we also understood that the standards that we had were not meeting the goals that we needed. And those of us who started the work were a group of people who were partially or deeply involved in the existing standards development. And I was looking at it going, it's not working. And clearly there's things that are working, so we need to jump stacks. And so we did that. We said if we built a healthcare standard on the web technology, then that would lead to a totally different set of outcomes. And that's what's playing out. And someone asked before, what makes FHIR different? And it's not us that make FHIR different, it's the fact that we stand on the web. The web technology, the web stack, that's the transformative thing. If you go to the community and you say, hey, there's a new standard, everybody goes, well, no. You have to make a big bang to make it worth people saying, hey, actually, we're going to look at the new standard. And the big bang is the web, not the standard. We also believed in the power of community. And that is the really key to what we were building. And I think if that is the actual enabler for everything that we do, we said everything we'll do will be open standard, open community, and we'll build and we'll encourage, and anybody can contribute to the degree that they can. Before, we'd pretty much had a closed circuit that you had to be pretty committed to be able to make any input, and you had to be financially empowered to do so. We believe in community. Nights like this are part of that. And what we do in FHIR is we build treasure that everybody owns. And that's what is different about what's happening today in IT, is that everybody can own something that is actually, we're all richer because we all own it. And that's what we do, is we are the curators for public treasure, which is everybody's contributions to the FHIR standard and the knowledge around the FHIR standard. But there's lots more to it than just the FHIR standard. I don't want people to say that's the only community. It's just one of a set of interlinked communities that build from terminologies, through security models, through the FHIR APIs, through the projects that build on that, to domain level expertise. But if we can move as much of that as possible into this public domain treasure, we're all richer and we can all benefit in different ways from having that. Because what we know is that healthcare needs change. If you're a patient, anyone in this room not a patient? If you're a patient, when you spend time as a patient, you know the system is not good enough. And everywhere I travel in the world, everybody tells me that the problem with healthcare is the way it's funded. Everywhere in the world, they tell me that. It's nothing to do with the way it's funded. Healthcare is hard. Maybe the way it's funded changes the way that the problems manifest, but the problems are real. And we're taking on the deepest problems around culture and biological complexity and risk management and the ability to consume human knowledge. We believe that FHIR could change that picture. But it's key to understand that IT doesn't change anything. Data doesn't change anything. They just empower real people to make real changes. All we can do is empower clinical champions to go, hey, I'm not held back by lack of IT support. I can go out and make real change to people's lives, and that's done by people. IT doesn't change anything except to empower those people. In my terms, we're about a third of the way through the life cycle of the FHIR standard. The first third is the creation of the community, the establishing the framework, getting people paying attention, getting people to understand what you've enabled. The second third is solidifying that creation of the standard and turning to implementation and growing implementation to the point where people understand what you can achieve. The final third, the standard development's done. It's now become senescent standard in maintenance, and you're moving your solutions into maintenance, and people are starting to firmly in production run up against the limitations of the standard itself. And there are some, the FHIR standard is a set of compromises aimed at solving the problems we have today. We didn't aim to solve the problems we had tomorrow. Tomorrow's problems were too hard. What that means is that there will come a time when FHIR is no longer the best standard you could imagine. And it will be someone else's problem to do what I did, which is to take everybody on and say, hey, there is a better way, and it's that much better that it's worth change. And it will be that much bigger a job when whoever it is takes that problem on in that third life cycle of FHIR. And hopefully I'll look at them and say, hey, you've got the passion, the determination, the ability to catalyse a community, to be sensible. I'm happy that you're going to take up the baton and fly. But in the meantime, we have the community that we have the standard that we have. Let's see how much we can make of it. I want to thank you for being here. I would encourage you all to join an open community. It doesn't have to be the FHIR community. We're kind of big and we grow, and one of the great things we've been able to do, because we're open, because we have public treasure, everybody comes and joins us. So in the past, a lot of the standards groups, they're all trying to solve slightly different problems, but they're all building their own stack and they don't actually work together. But now, increasingly, they're coming and saying, we want to do our work within your umbrella so that everything works together. That's a big deal. But it's not just this way, it's this way and that way and this other way. I encourage you all to spend some of your time contributing to public treasure of one kind or another to help all of us get better healthcare. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay. We're going to have 2 mic runners. And can you just repeat the question?
Okay.
For the sake of the video, please.
This is fantastic. I've been following FHIR for a long time. I'm curious, do you see any threats to the public treasure? Anything that mirrors the tragedy of the commons or anything of the sort?
So the question is whether there's any threats to the public treasure and the impact of the tragedy of the commons. You know, that's part of the big challenge for anybody who wants to follow my footsteps. The tragedy of the commons is a really big deal, and I didn't know how we were going to overcome that. And I have to thank ONC. So the Office of the National Coordinator of Healthcare IT is extremely forward thinking, and they stepped in and helped us across that chasm. Us as our team, because we have the tragedy of the commons. I didn't know how we were going to do it, and the US government stepped in and said we will cover that, and we wouldn't be where we are today if they hadn't done that. We, as holders of the public treasure, we can continue to hold that. It's no longer subject to the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons plays out in each of the individual groups, and if any of you represent organisations that wield money, you should pay attention to the fact that any of these cascading loops of dependency towards building public treasure that empower your business, they can all go astray because of the tragedy of the commons individually. We're not so much at the point where that matters anymore, because we've published, our stake in the ground and we have an incredible impetus behind us. But it certainly is an issue that will dog everybody who wants to contribute, is why are you doing that? and what's your motivation and how do you fund that?
So, I noticed in the description of this meeting, it said that 87% of health organizations have some form of FHIR implementation. The question really is how real is that, or what does that mean? Because I've been in this industry 30 years. I started in 1993 thinking that in 5 years we would be, it was basically banking,
Amen.
airline, healthcare.
Yeah.
That was the idea. And we're not there.
No.
And in fact, fintech, I think, is doing better. And people talk about security, but banking has actually been able to build some very nice integrated solutions with high security requirements, which I think which is something that we should look at and understand better, I believe. So what are your thoughts in terms of sort of a smoother flow, if you will, the vision of FHIR? Where are we, and what do you think are the barriers?
So 87% of organisations have FHIR. What does that mean? What are the barriers to making it real? So first of all, I know where the source of that number is. It's work that Stephen Posnack at ONC and I did together to say that those organisations certified against the meaningful use criteria and certified that they had available a FHIR interface. There's a series of things between having that and making it routinely available. They're supposed to be done. That doesn't mean that they always get done. One of the problems with it comes back to the clinical champion problem. You go to an institution and say, hey, you could spend this little bit of money. It's not that little, but relatively it's little, to enable interoperability, and they're like, have they heard that story before?
Yes.
Yeah, they kind of might have heard that before. We have to start showing the money men that this is actually a worthwhile investment, and that's its own challenge. It's really hard to do a control study on an interoperability benefit. In fact, has anybody ever seen one? Because you have to do so much infrastructure work, and then you're like, oh, we're only going to roll it out halfway? Or it's a really hard thing to do. I have actually seen a couple, but it's really hard to actually show that benefit. So there's a certain degree of time to get the funders to go, yes, this is a worthwhile investment to make. And that is where a lot of the action is at the CEO, VC, state or national ministry level department to actually create the infrastructure that makes these things policy possible, not merely now that they're technically possible. So, you've got to look at the whole stack. It's not just a technical problem, it's a people problem and it's a money problem, and you've got to solve those things. And those are all work in progress. Obviously, people here are probably mostly believers in the solution, but you have to build out the whole ecosystem, and then it becomes more and more reason to get involved in it as the ecosystem fleshes out. Any more questions?
The last one.
Hello. I noticed online that on January 11th there's a FHIR in France presentation going on. Could you speak to the subject at all of FHIR as an international applications or intercommunication standard?
Can I speak to the subject of FHIR as an international standard? So FHIR is an international standard. The leadership is spread around the world. Some of the leadership is in the United States, but the majority is actually not. The standard, initially we actually had more uptake outside USA, and USA was tardy. Then suddenly that all changed and USA is running ahead. But there's quite a lot of stuff happening in Canada, South America, Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and I travel the world following after all those things. One of the really interesting things is that until probably 2 years ago, everybody regarded healthcare data as jurisdictionally bound in two different ways. You can't move your healthcare data into a different jurisdiction, and software doesn't move across the jurisdictional boundaries without major change. So, for instance, the US vendors, the big Epic centers, want to come to Australia. They're going to have to do a bunch of engineering to bring it to Australia. I lived that because I was competing with them in Australia, and one of my great advantages is I didn't have to do that. But if I wanted to come to America, the USA, I'd have to do that same re-engineering. So both software crossed jurisdictional boundaries with a great deal of pain, and data did not cross jurisdictional boundaries ever. That's not the world we live in today, right? Consumer software is international in scope. Patients expect access to their data on their devices. Those devices roll out on an international basis. There's no tolerance now for either country going, oh, well, we don't do anything like that. It's not going to go well. And so at that level, at the standards level, we're starting to explore the pain that the consumer engagement process is creating. But the really weird thing is everybody pushing the consumer engagement thing is just focusing on their own country and just ignoring what's going to happen. But it's going to happen, right? And so I'm trying to get the various jurisdictions, the governments to go, actually, we have a problem. And of course, they're going, it's not our problem. Welcome to interoperability. It's not my problem, whatever problem it is. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll be